And we are back. And if you're joining us now, we are just getting our first conversation for this morning started. And as we said before the break, we are going to be talking with the Belize Police Department about the recent events, of course, related to the death of Deescalate, as well as a wider conversation about the police and their role and the training that they go through. And joining us for this conversation this morning, we have the Commissioner of Police, Chester Williams, as well as the Chairman of the Belize Police Association, ACP Bart Jones. Good morning.
Just one correction, Assistant Commissioner Bart Jones, Commander of the Research Planning, Legal Affairs and Compliance Branch.
Yes. Thanks for the correction. and thanks for joining us as well. We do appreciate this chance to talk about all of these pressing issues. And Commissioner, you've recently spoken about it in sort of limited, but just can you give us a little bit of a reaction to these recent events, as well as sort of the public's reaction as well? What has it been like for the past couple of days for you?
Yes, good morning, Gavin. Good morning, Marlene, and good morning to your viewers and listeners across the country and those who may be tuning in from abroad. I must say that the shooting death of Deescalate is heart-wrenching to anybody. I think that as parents, as human beings, we do feel for the family and friends of Deescalate. He was only 14 years old and certainly had not lived his life. And so, like the public, we are outraged. And let me state categorically that we support the protest. We only ask that the protests be done in a peaceful manner, and that those who may have some criminal intent may not use the opportunity of protest to go and commit whatever act they may intend to commit, particularly against police officers. We must understand that we're an organization. We're chartered with a very, very heavy responsibility, that of policing a society that at times have a number of persons with the propensity to be lawless. And so, while we engage those type of people, we do have rules of engagement. And I have listened to many in different quarters saying a bunch of things. And the reaction they have is tantamount to saying that police are not human beings, that police were not taken from within the same society that you live. Let me say that police officers are human beings. Police officers are your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your friends. So we are open to the same mistakes or the same misfortune as any ordinary person. And when some would say that, I listened to the president of the NTUCB yesterday saying that if you train somebody for kill, what you expect of them. Let me make it emphatically clear. At our academy, we do not train police officers to kill. We're not the military. The military may train to kill, not police. At our academy, we train our police officers to what is called justifiable use of force and harm. Justifiable use of force and harm is governed by Section 36 to Section 40 of the Criminal Code. It outlines there under what circumstances force can be used not only by the police, but any person, including you, the citizens. And in addition to that, we also have a use of force policy that we have implemented to be able to guide police officers as to how force is to be used in different circumstances. I also listened to my good friend Dickie condemning police, like police are the worst thing ever. But we fail to understand that when things goes wrong, that the same people we condemn are the ones that we call upon. I listened to him and they're my friend, you know. And the thing is that I am sure that if the police officer involved were to go to him to represent him, he would change his tune. Right? He might say Ladin was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Because everything is at the wrong place at the wrong time where the kid is concerned. Yes, he's a very funny fella. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that while I empathize with the family, because the truth is the young man ought not to have been killed. The police officer ought not to have pulled a weapon, but it happened. We have to deal with the consequence of it now. As a department, we have a duty. It will not serve us any good to try and cover the wrong of our officers. It will only encourage other officers to do the same. And so our response must be such that if there are any other officers out there who may have any such in his contemplation, that they are going to change. And so we responded swiftly. Right away, we had investigation team go in, and let me say that the investigators did not only go in by themselves. The Crown Counsel and the DPP office was also a part of the investigation, guiding the police officers in terms of what they can and what they cannot do, because we want to ensure that we gather the right evidence to present to the DPP for her to make her determination. And so that was done. By virtue of Section 36, Gavin, which you would be quite familiar with as an attorney, it says under Section 36(7) that where a person kills based on those reasons outlined, which there are a number of reasons there, burglary, robbery, treason, whatever, that the police must not charge, that the file or the matter must be referred to the Director of Public Prosecution. And the Director of Public Prosecution is the one who is going to deliberate as to whether or not any charge should be brought against the person. And so by law, we are bounded to follow what is stipulated there. And it went on to say that the DPP, in making her deliberation, must consider certain things. And again, as our minister said last night, and again as an attorney, you would know, Gavin, that in order to prove murder, you must prove that there was some malice of forethought, there was an intent to kill. How can we say that this police officer came on duty 4 p.m. that evening with intent to kill Ladin? How could we arrive at that? And so the DPP have to take those things into consideration in determining what charge to levy. Yeah. Now, for me, it doesn't matter what charge is levied. What matters for me is to ensure that we do what is right to ensure that the family of that young man get the justice that they say rightly deserve. And as the Commissioner of Police, I am saying it here, I've said it before, that we will do the right thing. We are not going to cover nobody. We're not going to tell lie to the public. We are going to do what is right to make sure that what needs to be done is done.
Let's backtrack for a bit. There's a lot you said, and I appreciate you bringing clarity so early on. As an attorney, as a trained attorney, do you feel that that was the strongest charge that could be levied against the officer?
Yes, I do.
Do you think there is any credence in the fact that he pulled out a gun for people who were fleeing, who weren't facing him, showed enough intent of wanting to commit a murder?
I don't think so, no. Okay. Yes, pulling out the gun and shoot may have been wrong, but that does not mean that he had malice of forethought or he had intent to kill. No.
Okay. Now, you can appreciate the fact that people are watching what's taking place and they're completely against the manslaughter charge, and that's part of what we hear the protest taking place. How do you address that when you are bound by what the laws dictate?
You see, Marlene, I've always said that the law or enforcement of the law must not be guided by how people feel or what people want. We are a democratic society. We are a society that is guided by the rule of law. And if it is that we have a situation where the police or the DPP or the courts react to how the people or the public feels, you know what is going to happen in our society? There's going to be anarchy. Because every time people are not satisfied with something, they're going to have protests, and then we bend or we do something to accommodate them and forget what is really meant by justice or the rule of law. So we have to be guided in situations like these by the evidence and nothing else but the evidence.
And it is important that we keep on explaining to people or educating people what our laws actually say, and if there's agitation to be made for a change in the laws, that's another move as well. But You know, you and I have agreed to disagree on quite a few things.
Yes.
But one thing that I know we can agree on, and I know every time we talk about issues related to the police, we always say the same thing. There are good cops. Yes. I know good cops, you know good cops. My question has to do with the fact that there wasn't only one officer on that scene. There were other officers as well. And my question has to do, where are the good cops in speaking out, in saying, don't, stop, that's not a good idea, or why are we doing this? Because there's something that's taking place culturally within the department where those who know better don't intervene.
I wouldn't say that they don't intervene, because the truth is, going around on the minister's throat, the minister, when this topic comes up, practically every police officer agreed that the policeman was wrong. Almost everyone agreed. Even in Placencia where it happened, they agreed that the officer was wrong. And it's an unfortunate situation. And Marlene, I have heard several things that police need training, police this, police that. The truth is, even in the mighty United States of America, where police officers are supposed to be well trained, if a matter of fact, every year or every 2 years they have to go and get a re-license, because in America, to be a police, you get a license from from the federal, from the state, to be able to be a law enforcement officer within that state. And even in America, where officers are well trained, there are police-related shootings. So why is it that we are going to condemn our department for one shooting? Yes, they have had other shootings in the past, but we cannot compare a justified shooting to an unjustified one. We cannot. It's like mixing apple and oranges, because there are going to be instances where the police must pull out their gun and they must shoot.
Well, that takes us back to training and policy, and that's one of the things we want to get clear this morning. Because from all that has been described, and clearly from what you're saying, you see this as an unjustified shooting in this incident.
Yes.
Now, what is the actual training that these officers have gotten as to how to respond in a situation like that, and what were the errors made?
I yield to Mr. Jones.
Good morning again, Marlene, Mr. Gavin, and your viewers in Belize and across the world. Certainly, as to start off from your point, that there are indeed good cops. If we take any given day across this country, there are, I would say, maybe about close to 300 police officers on duty at any one time, if we take the country on a whole. And all of these officers are interacting with members of the public. Now, there will be situations where incidents occur that is not in line with what we are trained to do, and so there will be those bad apples. But if you look at, by and large, the entire country and the interaction with the public every day, the incidents are far and few between. So in terms of the training, as the Commissioner mentioned, we get the training on justifiable force and harm, which dictates, and they're going to painstakingly go into when you are to use deadly force and when you're not to use deadly force, if you start from that. But in terms of force, any force, if we are just going to pat somebody, that's a use of force, and that must be justified. Evading a person's space must also be justified, and so we start from those levels, and the force continuum is basically what the amount of force being used against you must then, that dictates the force that will use against that person, and then it escalates to where deadly force can go. And so our use of force policy dictates that. It is clearly stated there that the shooting of a fleeing person is prohibited.
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 Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely prohibited. And so
unarmed.
Yes, and so so that is strictly prohibited. So there will be, as Commissioner said, these incidents where, we feel it as well as persons, as police officers, as Sir Robert Peel says, the police is the community and the community is the police. Police is drawn from the same community, so in fact we are, so there's that on Forest Drive in Belmont, a factory that produces these, police officers that are, different from the society, we come from the same society. So these, in fact, impact. There are police officers who that young man has the same age as their child, in some instance their grandchild. So it is that, you know, these kinds of things that we certainly, you know, it's not what we train for, and certainly one that we regret.
But let's take it further, because I think saying, unfortunately it happened, I mean, what went wrong on that night? Why was a gun taken out, shot at two very petite young boys? We have to say, they didn't look like big burly men that were over 14 or 19. They were two small young boys running away on the beach just a little bit after curfew. One was shot and killed. The other was beaten and detained.
Marlene,
so what went wrong?
We were not there. We cannot go into the minds of those police officers.
Have you had conversations with them?
No, I have stayed away from the investigation because I don't want anything to be said that I am influencing anything. We have competent investigators. They do the investigation along with the Crown Counsel from the DPP office. But again, like I said, we are not in the heads of these police officers to know what they are thinking. But like we have said, and I repeat again, that what took place on the night in question was horrific and ought not to have occurred. Now, as Mr. Jones said, what we teaches our officers in the academy is the use of justifiable use of force and harm. And even simple to arrest a person, you can't just walk up to a person and touch her and pull her and say, I arrest you. There is a process. There's a case from the House of Lords, Collin and Woolcock, where a police officer, a female police officer, went to arrest a lady. And she grabbed the lady and took her away. And then she eventually charged, because the lady resisted, and we have assaulted her in the process. She ended up charging the lady for resisting arrest and assault. And the House of Lords said that the officer fell short of placing the woman under arrest before touching her, because that's the process you must go through. If it is that you have placed the person under arrest, then you have the authority to touch the person, to get the person into custody. But again, that touch must not be such that it is going to be too much, like to push the person or these sort of things. And so we try to instill in our officers at all times the use of minimal force. And the force must only escalate based on the situation that the officer is encountering at the particular time. And while we look at this whole situation, I need the public to understand, and this is no justification, let me make that caveat one time, to understand that we're living in a society where the propensity for younger people has become so deadly, to some extent even deadlier than the older folks. When we look in society today, and we see the amount of murders being committed by children, it is alarming. And the same way how we have the public and the different organizations coming out against the police for this, which I must say is good, it's the same way I would like to see the public and the other organization comes out when a child is accused of killing somebody, because when that happens, there is a serious breakdown in a home that needs to be addressed. And sending that child to prison may not be the solution, but rather to see the public comes out and try to find some alternative method to be able to address these deadly propensities of our young people. Because if we continue this way, it is going to have more and more encounters with police and young people. And that is not the way we want to go. So we have to collectively come together to see how we can help parents who are not able to keep their children in check, to be able to do the right thing. And while, yes, they condemn us for this one incident, let me say that the police department is 2,300 strong. It is not easy for us to control 2,300 officers. If a matter of fact, in a home, you might have 2 or 3 children, and the parent tries so arduously to raise these children in the best way possible with good morals. But at the end of the day, 1 or 2, and in some cases, all of them, turn out to the contrary. So it's all a part of human nature. We can train people all we want, but at the end of the day, people have an individual responsibility to ensure that whatever training they undergo, that they take in what they learn from that training and apply it the right way.
I hear what you're saying in terms of the demographic of people involved in crime is changing, but this is clearly not the case with this individual incident down south.
And that's why I made that
clear. And I know you said that very clearly. But let me bring this back, because what it seems to be is a trigger-happy, not just this one instance, a reactive sense from the police department. But let's flip the question. How often have we had an officer involved in a beating or harm or violent incident? I can't remember reporting any. So this perceived threat that the officers have, where they are so reactive, is all in I mean, if you can tell me the number of incidents where your officers have come under harm and we realize that they're reacting because they're facing real dangers out there. I'm not saying we have a justifiable reason, but...
You know, the funny thing, Marlene, is that whenever the police officers comes and attack, it is never broadcasted.
But it may,
the minute
is it physical or verbal?
There is both. And I am sure, Marlene, you have seen, I saw them on the news, a number of occasions where police go to detain people and a mob would attack the police.
Well, we have a video from last night,
yes,
where
I
warning
saw two.
shots were shown.
There were two last night.
Yeah.
Right? Where the
Was that justifiable?
But the police officers were being attacked by a mob. The police fired 2 warning shots to get the mob off. What must they do?
But there's also, I mean, let's look at what's unfolding there too. And this is where you go back to talking about the approach. Should you touch before you arrest? What's the approach that you make when you go in to communities that, quite frankly, let's be honest, are already very much hostile towards the police?
And those are the communities that we still have to go in.
Yeah.
And I
but
could
it's like
give,
a vicious cycle.
Yes,
You get
and I
aggressive,
could give,
they get...
and there are times where the police certainly approach an incident, receive a report, going to an incident, do not anticipate that there would be a mob attack or a response. I give an example. In about, I think, 2009, there about myself and the then Commissioner Jeffries, we had just finished the working the agriculture and trade show. So we ensured that everybody is cleared from the grounds, and he and I were then departing Belmopan to head to Belize City. At the bus stop, where now there's now the roundabout, he saw a family there. And so Mr. Jeffries then stopped to see if these people were looking for a ride to go to Belize City, because at that time all buses had gone. The moment he stopped the vehicle, the gentleman said to the lady, "What do you want now?" So there's, to show that there's, in some instances, there's immediate hostility towards the police. And those are some of the cultures that we're trying to change with policies and with new trend in training and so on. So we are trying to change that culture, but it will take a time. It will take a time. Yeah. You spoke earlier, where were the good cops at that incident in Placentia? Now, when an incident like that occurs, it's split seconds. It's an incident like that, it's split seconds. Even if we may say, where were the good cops? They might be there, but when something like that happens, it's, you know, unexpected. So it's not like where it may have been an incident that escalated and said the good cops could have intervened.
How often is it where someone makes a bad decision in the spot and there isn't a track record of bad decisions made before? How often is it?
Well, this police officer in question, there's
nothing on his record.
No, he's a quiet individual.
So he just made that decision at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm certain that if there was, I believe that those members of the public would have already said that that's his demeanor, that's his approach to situation. So,
but do you also consider that, in a general sense, there is a real problem in terms of the culture within the department, in terms of maybe training not, or the training is not necessarily reflected in that certain officers just feel justified in using violence, or is it really, or is it sort of certain rogue elements, as you know, in the terms?
If we say training, the lack of training, then of the 2,000 plus that Commissioner mentioned that is in the department, then if you take that there's the lack of training, then you would expect that there would be more incidents of these kind, because police lack training. So I would not equate it to a lack of training. And certainly we recognize still that in the issue in relation to minors, and in this case I'm talking about minors, any person below the age of 18, that there is, yes, the need for us to look at how we treat with minors generally. And I'm happy to say that soon to be released to the department is a policy on a child interaction policy that we have been working on, that we recognize that at different levels, police officers are interacting with children. There are occasions when a child is a victim of a crime, and that is one type of interaction. There is an interaction with the child when the child is a witness to a crime, and then there is those interactions at school, where our community policing officers interact with children at school, and there will be those occasions when the police interacting with a child who is a suspect in a crime. So we recognize that we need to then look at that overall child interaction policy, and that is where we are.
Even the ones that are 17 are still children.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I made the point that we consider the child any person under the age of 18. And so we're looking at police interaction with children on a whole. But there are occasions when a situation may arise where until the end, we recognize that this person is an underage, under 18. So it's not that police set out to target children. Yes.
And may I say, to add to what Mr. Jones said, that we do work very closely with UNICEF on these issues relating to children. And if it is that there are any organization out there, either the Human Rights Commission, the NCFC, even if the NTUCB, any organization that wants to join us to look at these policies to see how we can make it better, I welcome it, because we may not have all the answers. And so whatever input we can get from civil society or other NGOs, we are certainly going to welcome it. I would like to commission Mr. Jones to get to these different organizations and bring them to the table and have maybe a 1-day or 2-day workshop to go through these policies and see if they have any input that they like to incorporate. Because what we want is to have something that the public feel comfortable with. And if we can do that together, then I welcome that.
It would be great if your PR department too would educate the public on how a police. I always remember when our good friend Dickie Bradley was on the show explaining that in fact you have the right to ask a police officer for their name and badge number. But he also followed up very quickly and say, but listen, depending on who you are and what neighborhood, don't ask because they'll beat you. Because that's the reality. That is the reality. Let me bring it back a second here, Commissioner. You have been leading the department for 3 years?
2.5 years.
Almost 3 years. I beat you to your anniversary. But, you know, COVID and everything else has just come in like a wind of change. And there is clearly a need for change in the department. One, I'm sure you recognized when you took over. Let's look at 3 main incidents. You had the dreadlock case, which you took to court, and you lost. You had the recent racial profiling case that came to an end yesterday. And now today we're looking at police-involved shooting. These are major issues that require a change in thought and culture within the department. What's your stance on being able to lead a department that is of this century rather than antiquated laws?
Marlene, I am happy to be the Commissioner of Police at this time, and I can tell you that since I became the Commissioner, we have made a lot of changes. In terms of policy, for a matter of fact, one of the first things I did upon taking office was to commission the RPLAC, which Mr. Jones is in charge of, to look at revising all our policies. And so today we have a policy manual on every issues or every interaction that police may have with the public. And again, we also have done another major thing is to look at the academy itself, to revise the curriculum. We now have a Dean of Academic Studies at the academy to make sure that our training is in line with what is done at universities. And there are several other things that we have done. Yes, the issue with the dreadlock situation, I would not say that it was a loss, because the court basically outlined that the policy is not illegal. but the court guides us in terms of how the policy is to be applied. Simply that the court said. And so I do not consider it as a loss. Now the issue with the
but win or lose, it is an antiquated
but just one correction to Marlene, I don't, the other case that concluded yesterday, just to make sure that we do not see it as a racial profiling case.
Yes.
It was a case that dealt with the issue of photographing persons and their identification, but it not necessarily the issue of racial profiling. I say that because if you're going to take police officers interacting with the public in Belize City, there's a certain demographic of persons. In the north, it will be different. So it is not, we don't see it as a racial profiling. It's just to
agreed, but while you may have a specific definition, can we just agree here and say that profiling exists? That Gavin won't be stopped walking down the street, I won't be stopped.
Marlene, we have to understand, you know, I tend to worry about my society a lot. And I say that because times have changed. The peaceful Belize we once no longer exists. Back in 1994, you have one murder for the entire country for the year. Prior to that instance, you have no murders for the year. Today, we're averaging over 100 murders per year. It goes to show that society has is changing the propensity for people to become violent. It's changing. And if it is that you have in a community where a certain class of people are the ones who are giving trouble, who must the police go after? Won't it be them? In places like Orange Walk, Crozal, the demographics of people giving trouble is different than Belize City. And so you'll find that in Belize City, for the most part, the young black youths the police will be interacting with. In Crozal and Orange Walk, it will be young Hispanic people. In Punta Gorda, it will be young Mayan or young black people. So it goes to the demographics of the era we're policing. And the fact that the society has become so violent to some extent, the police have to do certain things. Look at, for example, in New York, where they used to have, they have the stop and frisk. The police stopped stop and frisk. And what happened in New York was murders went up, skyrocket. They had to bring it back. And so I would like to see where the courts would understand that because of the fact that society is changing, the police in its crime-fighting effort must do certain things to keep society in order. Because at the end of the day, that you and I and our children or grandchildren are going to suffer, you know. And these are things that people are not looking ahead, they're looking at now. Now, the issue with Greg Nunes and Mr. Cad, they're upstanding people. But the truth is, because of the fact that the police interact so much with people, there are going to be good people who are going to be caught up in the whole issue with police. My son, age 17, was held up at gunpoint by police because he was in a neighborhood where police operation was ongoing. And he called me, he said, "Dad, police point gun for me. Atla, where were you, Latrell? I passed through Super Street. What are you doing there?" So at the end of the day, while I empathize with him for what happened, I have to understand that the police have a job to do and they're going to do the job. Right? So we have to strike a balance.
Agreed.
And a very, very thin balance too.
What you're saying, let's give an example people know. When they push the ban gillnet, right? It's because you catch some of the good things with the bad. You are openly admitting that there is a class of people that must live under a threat, that they would be stopped and searched, not because they are involved in crime or have been involved in crime or looking to be involved in crime, but just because of how they look.
No, Marlene, you're stretching it too far. Gavin, you're a black man. Have you ever been stopped and searched by the police?
Not walking, but in driving I have actually.
Exactly. Right? So at the end of the day, Marlene, when police are doing their work, like I said, there are going to be good people that they're going to stop, there are going to be bad people that they're going to stop. Now, when it comes to police operations, like when I say going to people's home, for the most part, those are done based on intelligence and targeted. So you'll find that when police go and do a house search, it is because of intelligence that we had received that certain things are happening at that particular house. But let's say at a checkpoint, At a checkpoint, the police might just randomly stop and search vehicles. And it happens all over the world, right? So what some people do, they by number of vehicles, okay, they stop and search one, they allow 4 to go, stop and search one, allow 3 to go. And you might happen to be in a one that the police stop. It does not mean that the police is targeting you. It's just conducting a random search.
And I do want to bring it back just a little bit, just going back to the issue of striking that balance. And how, I want to look at the issue of going back to training or even ongoing training or counseling or whatever the officers receive, because, you know, as you do rightly point out, society is getting more violent. How is it that the department ensures that when officers have to intervene in these situations that they don't, because, you know, you can argue that it is the duty on the police is even greater to de-escalate situations, to ensure that, you know, violence and chaos doesn't actually break out. So there should be an emphasis on, you know, that sort of intervention to de-escalate and to bring situations on, rather than, you know, to enter with violence or to shoot. So what sort of training or ongoing procedures are in place to ensure that?
I'm glad you asked that question, Gavin, for the simple fact that, like I said earlier, we have now a Dean of Academic Studies, and that is what we have now incorporated into our curriculum at the Academy. We now have a gang conflict mediation lesson that is now taught to the recruits at the Academy, where they're going to be taught how to deal with persons in gang-ridden neighborhoods, how to de-escalate situations without the use of guns and other methods. So for the first time, we now have that incorporated in our curriculum at the Academy. So when training is done, the training unit from the Academy is going to go around the country, and a major player in this is Brother Nouri Mohammed, who you know is employed by us as our gang conflict mediator. And so he is a part of that training, and they'll be going to each and every formation to teach officers how to deal with situations of such.
So they'll be doing a refresher.
Yes, yes.
And that was really going to be my question.
Just to add to that, though, for many years, as I can remember, we have slots allocated for the Human Rights Commission to come in and do on human rights. So that has been from many years now. Every recruit training, human rights has a slot coming to deal with and present on human rights to the recruits. And this year is no different. They are incorporated in the current training to go and I think it's a 1-week training that human rights do with the recruits. So, and that is going to be done again this week or next week as part of the training. And
this is a part of the change, as you noted, you've implemented within the training academy. These are for new recruits. Yes. But clearly you've had some experienced people in the field who have, like anybody else who work in one place for long, fall into bad habits, right? Yeah. Habits that in some way work for them, but not necessarily a good practice. What do we do to correct those behaviors?
Well, just first though, in terms of refresher though, it was just last year, I think the farmer, Mr. Sutherland, farmer commander of the Professional Standards Branch, did a countrywide tour where he presented unjustifiable force and harm as a refresher to officers across the country. So these kind of thing is part of our in-service training as well. So it's a constant reminder. You do it, but there will be occasions when things happen, but we try to prevent these.
You know, I remember early on when you became commissioner, one of your main goals was to enhance the community policing, because this problem of hostility by particular neighborhoods or groups or areas was already recognized. And you felt that it was important that people build a good relationship with the police. When we were growing up, you know, you wanted to be a community worker, and that included police, doctor, teacher. Now we have young kids growing up fearing or already having a bad feeling towards the police.
Because, Marlene, too, that while some of us grow up wanting to be community workers, there are some of those children say, you have to get trouble and call the police. And so from a young age, you grow up, they grow up feared that the police is somebody to be feared. You know? And you have,
so you're not seen as a protection anymore, right. You're seen as a punishment.
In some neighborhoods, you'll see the police patrol. Officer come deal with this one, he like get trouble. And this is what you see, so they'll, you know.
And may I say, Marlene, that community policing remains a hallmark of my administration. Every day press on my officers to ensure that we pursue our community policing objectives. And I am happy that with the new government under the Plan Belize agenda, that is the hallmark of policing in the Plan Belize agenda. And so what we have done is in every district or every formation, even the sub-formations like Hattieville, Ladyville, we now have what is called a Citizen Advisory Committee. And we push for that because we want the public to be a part of what we do. The Citizen Advisory Committee is a committee of civilians who sits on a board and they advises the police on issues relating to the community, and then the police is to respond. On that committee, the OC is an ex-official member, and he must attend every meeting that the community has. And again, that for me is significant because it shows that the public is still willing to work with us. The public is still there as a guide to bring us back in line when we're stepping aside. And it goes a long way. On our minister tour, again, he emphasized the same point, that it is important that we work together with the public. No police organization across the world could strive without the assistance of the public because it's a public that gives us a mandate to police. And so we have to work with them. Mr. Courtney spoke earlier about the issue of reform. That is, again, one of our issues, that we, under the new government, we are working on reforming certain aspects of policing. It is not going to happen overnight, Gavin. It is going to take some time. And it's also going to take the whole issue of the public being willing to help us to make that reform. So we are open to it. We are not going to say we have a perfect organization. We are certainly with sins. And what we are going to strive for is to reduce the amount of sins that we commit. Because the truth is, no matter what we do, we're always going to be with sin because we're dealing with human beings. But certainly we can work to reducing the amount of sins that we commit. We want the public to have...
And I think people also want to see that the response to when there is an allegation or a capturing of a video of some bad behavior by police, that the response from the very top, from you and your minister.
Marlene, I think one of the issue, one of our failure is that we do not broadcast enough when we deal with these individuals. Because the truth is, so every time we have these situations, those officers are dealt with. I listened to my friend Dickie again yesterday on Love FM when he said that professional standard branch is a waste of time, that he have not seen nothing coming from there. Mr. Jones can give you the update, and please, Jones, if you have it, the update of the amount of officers we have dismissed this year alone for breaching department policies.
So what happens with PC Martinez now?
He's on interdiction, right? So, Mr. Jones, you have the list of the...
Do you imagine that he will continue on as a police officer after the case is...
The serious nature of the case is one that, if convicted, will be a dismissal.
And if the case falls apart, with all you know so far?
We still have the internal issues, the internal matters. And I certainly do not foresee the case falling apart. So I'm not even going to think about that.
I want to ask another question here, and maybe you can help us to clarify. When he was escorted out of the court on Friday, we can see where he was heavily shielded by, we are told, some of the persons are police officers as well. When you talk about wanting to be fair, this is one, and our cameraman was there, the media was there. We had Inspector Yearwood speaking about not wearing fishing masks and covering your face too much, and this is what we see when he's escorted out of
Marlene, we have to be real again. We're living in the real world, you know. And I was not at court, I just heard the talking. Here we have a police officer who is accused of killing a 14-year-old. A case that have outraged the entire nation of Belize. He's been taken to court. He's been escorted from court. Do you expect the police is going to leave him open for people who may want to harm him? The police still have a responsibility to protect every person who is accused of committing a crime and is in their care. If something were to happen to that policeman whilst in the care of those police officers escorting him, his family can sue the department because we still have an obligation to protect him.
I hear your point, but let's backtrack. A camera is not a gun. A news camera is not a gun and very identifiable.
Marlene, I understand that. But what is there to say that a newsman or a cameraman may not have a gun and may want to harm somebody?
Well, they're definitely looking in the wrong direction, looking at the camera and know what the hand is.
We have to be real, Marlene.
No, I am being
Right?
real.
Anywhere,
and these are the types of exceptional circumstances we've seen where the police will parade some prisoners. They will make sure they have that walk of shame, even if they try to hide the face. And when it's one of their own, there is this extreme protection that takes place. These are some of the subliminal messages that lead the public to believe that you, in fact, stand along with it and not against
no,
it.
Marlene, you are wrong. And again,
That's what I'm saying. It's a message that is put out there when people see it.
You see, I don't act based on what people think. Because if I act based on what people think or try to please everybody, I'm going to die. It is not going to happen. There are different categories of prisoners. If the US were to escort El Chapo and they're to escort me, both as prisoners, who do you think they're going to take greater care in escorting? El Chapo, because of the high-profile nature of him. And they have to ensure that whilst in their custody, that he is protected. The same thing they said when the police escorted Jasmine. She was protected too because she was a high-profile prisoner. Police officers themselves were irritated with her. So she had to be protected. Now, if you have a prisoner who is not high-profile, then it reduces the amount of escort. When we had the case of Danny Mason, the amount of escort we had for Danny Mason was no joke. Again, because he's a high-profile prisoner. So while the public may think certain things, I want to say to the public that is not the case. It is just a matter of us ensuring that these prisoners, when in our care, that they are protected. Because if something goes wrong, we will have to answer.
Yeah, and to add to what Commissioner is saying, that yes, that might be a perceived view, but that is not necessarily the case, or that is not necessarily the view of the entire department. And as well, when we talk about, you were talking about the charges and so on, I was just thinking that we want justice for Larry, but what is justice? And so justice must be served on both sides as well, no? As hard as we want to accept that. The police officer now, he has been arraigned, he has the process of justice must goes. So justice is not one-sided still.
And we've not heard his side as yet. And that's also something I want to acknowledge as to what he says took place then. Not that there will be any excuse. I think that people will be able to digest as to why the shooting took place.
I fully agree.
But from your opinion, do you feel it was just an error in judgment at that time? Do you feel that it was a reactiveness?
I honestly think it's an error in judgment. And that's my
I feel so too, and especially given the kind of
person the police officer is.
You hear from persons that would have worked with this police officer, you could say that it's an error in judgment.
Commissioner, people have asked whether or not PC Martinez is a relative of yours. Can you respond to that?
Honestly, Marlene, when the incident occurred, I did not know. I didn't even know he was from CNY. And so my minister showed me a post on Facebook where a certain person was saying that the young man is my nephew. And I was like, no, I don't even know him. And so I called my mother and I asked her, I said, who is this policeman? And then she said to me that the young man's grandfather is my mother's father's brother. So he's a distant relative of mine. But for me...
Had you met him before?
No, I don't know him. For me, it doesn't matter. He could have been my brother. If he is wrong, he's wrong. And the truth is, I put myself in the shoe of Laddie's parents. If it were me, how would I feel? And so when it comes to situations like these, we have to be truthful to ourselves because we never know when the shoe is going to be on the other feet.
I have one more question on looking. You mentioned your minister, and it's one of the questions I've been thinking of. Exactly 2 years ago, now Minister Musa, but then a member of the opposition, was extremely vocal about a police-related shooting. Alison Major, downtown Belize, is a teacher, and a very public case a lot of the messages that we're hearing right now from the public was what we heard 2 years ago in 2019, July. What's that conversation been like with the minister, especially since you know he had a very public stance on police-related shootings?
The minister stands firm on his belief that as police officers, we need to be more careful in terms of how we engage with the public. And he was on Love FM yesterday. And again, he remains vocal on the issues because there are certain things, Marlene, that you just cannot condone. And our minister, being the person he is, being an advocate for human rights, he is always going to stand for human rights. Yes, he do understand and sympathize with the police because at the end of the day, we're humans. But sympathizing with somebody does not mean that you agree with them. And so that has been our stance. And the minister said to me from the inception, he said, Commissioner, we must deal with it and we must deal with it swiftly. And that is exactly what we did.
And so just to add to the point that we said earlier, Marlene, there will be these instances, but I think we are more judged on how our response to the incidents than as opposed to the incidents themselves. And so that is where the distinction, I think, will be how we respond to these allegations and how swiftly we send the message in terms of these incidents. I think that is more where we are going to be judged.
There's also a time to try to mend the relationship with the public. You know, you've spoken of appreciating the protests that are taking place across the country. Some of those are pushing even curfew hours. We know that much.
And I told my officers countrywide to just allow them. And we even go as far as escorting them. We do support it. We understand the public concern. We understand the public cry. And as a department, we cannot stand in the way of what is right. I honestly believe that the protest is needed for people to express themselves. And as police officers, it is for us to understand that certain things we do the public is not happy with, and we need to take a look at ourselves to see what we can do better to improve the relationship we have with the public. So I am never going to stop the protest from happening.
What's the morale of the force right now?
Well, the police morale is good. For the most part, officers do understand that when we step out of line, action must be done, and they see it as that. Now, yes, officers may be reluctant in certain respect to go out and do their job and use their weapon when needs be. So we might see a bit of step back from officers because they may fear using their gun even justifiably and may find themselves in the same position as Martinez. So there's going to be that resistance, and it always happens when there is a police-related shooting, and eventually police would just regain back that momentum.
Because I believe that even if we're in a situation where the police is justified in using deadly force on someone, there will still be that outcry, regardless of whether it is justified or not. And so, as Commissioner said, there may be, and it is for us to reach out to police officers to continue to motivate them to ensure that, you know, once you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing. But there will be, I believe that there will be some reluctance on part of some officers to, you know, and we wouldn't want that to go too far because this public will then suffer, because if police is reluctant to react to certain situations, then it is to the detriment of the public as well. So, because some police officer will say, well, better you deal with me for not responding than the public say that, you know. So that is where we have to now try to mend on that, and so that doesn't.
All right, let me just bring it to one more topic before we close off. I know you were supposed to go a long time ago, but the vaccination of the police department and getting everyone on board. I know it took you a while to get your shot. We gave you a hard time about that, but you got your first one, and I imagine you probably have a month more to go or two before you get your second. What's the promotion like, and how do you feel about the new SI that will mandate providing tests?
Well, I have been encouraging officers to get vaccinated, myself and the minister, on our tour, on the minister's tour. It is a part of what we are pushing for. But we also make it known to officers that they're not being compelled to be vaccinated. As a part of the tour, the minister invited personnel from the Ministry of Health to explain to the officers the need for the vaccine. And with the view that we'll be able to get them to be vaccinated. Like I said to them, you know, the major cry is that the vaccine do have side effects. But at the same time, Marlene, name me one medication that is on the shelves of our drugstore that do not have a side effect. Every medication do have a side effect. And at the end of the day, the side effect is just there to tell you that you may. It does not mean that you're going to suffer the side effect that is listed there. Because I personally, when I took the vaccine, I had not a piece of side effect. Nothing. I remained normal, right? But there are people who reacted adversely to it. But the thing is, the question is, if these medications do have side effects, then why are they still on our drugstore shelves? And the answer is, the good that it does far outweighs the side effect. And based on that, I believe FDA continue to approve these medications to be sold for human consumption. So it's the same thing with the vaccine. While it's going to have side effect, we must think about what is it going to do for us, right? To give us that level of immunity that we need in the event that we contract the virus, that we'll be able to fight it successfully. And so we just explain that to officers. The Ministry of Health personnel comes in and explain to the officers. And I can tell you that we're seeing that more and more officers are getting vaccinated now.
And you have no problem with the mandatory test that will have to be presented come August?
Well, I personally don't have an issue with it because, again, when we look at our Constitution under Section 3 that speaks to limitations, one of the limitations there is the protection of the right of others and public health. And so if it is that the government sees it fit that we must test people regularly to ensure that we protect the most vulnerable in our society, then that goes in line with the constitutional limitation in terms of protecting the rights of others and public health. So I have always said that while some of us may be able to live with the virus if we catch it, there are some of us who our body is just not going to allow us to live with it. And the government do have a responsibility to protect those people.
Last week you mentioned that the group of people who have been deliberately spreading fake information about vaccines, that you would consider charging them or looking into charges for spreading false information. Attorney Saldivar, who'd been previously charged for false information before, is also a part of that group. Where are we with that process?
Saldivar is my friend, you know.
I imagine, yeah. But it is, I mean, this law was created, let's go back to 2020, when this law was created. There was a lot of hysteria very early on, and it was important for facts to be the base of the knowledge going out.
Yes. Yeah, but at the end of the day, Marlene, while we do welcome different opinions about the vaccine, we do have a law that says that in order for you to practice medicine or to give medicinal or health opinion, you must be a registered medical practitioner. And from what we gather is that two of the persons who are a part of that group who are giving medical opinion do not have license to practice law in Belize. And so for do not have license to practice law in Belize, and so they would have been acting in violation of that law. And it is with that spirit that we are contemplating prosecuting them. The investigation is still ongoing. I spoke to Mr. Romero yesterday. I think he said that they have about 2 more statements to record. And once that is done, then we're going to send the file to DPP, and we're going to get her opinion on it.
Okay. All right. Any final thoughts before we go?
I'd just like Mr. Jones to go through the list of persons who have been dismissed so far this year.
Oh, we did.
Yes, we had a total of, I think, 9 persons who were dismissed this year for wrongdoing, including being intoxicated while on duty, and 2 for, 1 for excessive force, and 2 for involving drug trafficking.
Okay.
And we have another one who was dismissed yesterday who was involved in the fatal shooting in Punta Gorda with Mario Vernon. That case also concluded, and the officer was dismissed yesterday.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate you coming in this morning to speak to us and let us know a bit about the training and about how you move forward in a time like this.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marlene, and thank you, Council.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be shifting to positive activities for the kids, courtesy of The Hub. That's coming up in a few. Stay tuned.